If you look at a map of North America, the cities of Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver appear to be thriving icons of modernity. Surrounded by lush evergreen forests, iconic snow-capped volcanic peaks, and stunning coastal waters, millions of people live, work, and build their lives across this vibrant region known as the Pacific Northwest. But beneath this pristine landscape lies a geological ticking time bomb, a subterranean fault line capable of unleashing the most catastrophic natural disaster in the history of North America. For generations, the people living in the Pacific Northwest operated under a dangerous illusion. Unlike California, which is famously crisscrossed by the visible, constantly shifting San Andreas Fault, Oregon and Washington seemed largely peaceful. Major earthquakes were seen as a southern problem. But modern geologists now know that the peace of the Pacific Northwest is not safety. It is a delusion. The region is not immune to massive earthquakes. It is simply locked in a deep, agonizingly silent preparation phase for an event so massive it defies human imagination. To understand why this area is sitting on the edge of destruction, you have to look 700 miles off the Pacific coast, stretching from northern California all the way up to Vancouver Island. Deep beneath the ocean surface lies the Cascadia Subduction Zone, a massive convergent boundary where the floor of the Pacific Ocean is being forcefully shoved beneath the continental North American continent. Two major tectonic plates, the Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate, are locked in an unyielding battle of planetary physics. In a subduction zone, one plate slides beneath another. As the oceanic crust moves east, it grinds against the bottom of the North American continent. But the plates aren't sliding smoothly. Because of the incredible pressure and friction, they are stuck together, completely locked in place. Yet the fundamental forces driving continental drift never stop. The Juan de Fuca plate continues pushing relentlessly forward at a rate of about 4 centimeters every year. Because the edge of the North American plate cannot move, it is compressing like a giant spring. The entire coastline of Oregon and Washington is actually being squeezed, buckled, and lifted upward by several millimeters every year as stress builds up along a 700-mile contact zone. Every single second that passes without an earthquake adds more kinetic energy into this planetary spring. And when a spring under that much pressure finally snaps, the release of energy is catastrophic. When people think of major earthquakes, they often think of events like the 1994 Northridge quake in Los Angeles, or the 1989 Loma Prieta quake in San Francisco. Those were magnitude 6.7 and 6.9 events, caused by strike-slip faults where landslides horizontally passed land. Subduction zones, however, operate on an entirely different scale. They are the only geological structures on Earth capable of producing what scientists call Megathrust Earthquakes, events with magnitudes reaching 8.7 to 9.2 or higher. To put that scale into perspective, the moment magnitude scale is logarithmic. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake does not release slightly more energy than an 8.0. It releases over 30 times more energy. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is capable of unleashing a megathrust event comparable to the 2004 Sumatra earthquake or the devastating 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan. When the Cascadia fault snaps, the shaking won't last for 20 or 30 seconds. The ground will violently roll, heave, and shake for 4 to 6 full minutes. For over 2 centuries after European settlers arrived in the region, no one knew this fault line even existed. There were no written records, no historic stories of massive quakes in the local archives, and no obvious active fault lines on the surface. For a long time, geologists assumed the subduction zone was silent or sliding continuously without storing energy. But in the late 20th century, scientists began uncovering terrifying clues left behind in the Earth itself. In the coastal marshes of Washington and Oregon, paleoseismologists discovered ghost forests, stands of ancient red cedar trees that died suddenly centuries ago. When researchers dug into the mud around these dead trees, they found something shocking. Layers of tidal marsh soil suddenly buried beneath ocean sand, followed by saltwater mud. The trees hadn't died of disease. The entire coastline had instantaneously dropped up to 6 feet into the ocean, drowning the roots in salt water. Across the Pacific Ocean, Japanese historians possessed precise records of an orphan tsunami, a massive destructive ocean wave that struck the coast of Japan on the night of January 26, 1700, without any local earthquake being felt. By running mathematical models backward through time, scientists linked the ghost forests of Cascadia directly to the orphan tsunami in Japan. The conclusion was undeniable. On January 26, 1700, at roughly 9 p.m., the entire Cascadia Subduction Zone ruptured in a magnitude 9.0 Megathrust earthquake, dropping the Pacific Northwest coast and sending a wall of water surging across the Pacific Ocean. By studying sediment cores drawn from the ocean floor, scientists have now mapped out the historical timeline of Cascadia's grand ruptures over thousands of years. The data reveals a terrifying pattern. Major full-margin ruptures occur, on average, every 400 to 500 years, with partial ruptures along the southern section occurring roughly every 240 years. The last full rupture occurred in 1700. That was over 320 years ago. Geologically speaking, the Pacific Northwest is sitting comfortably inside the recurrence window. Emergency management calculations indicate that there is roughly a 37% to 43% chance of a full-margin magnitude 9.0 rupture that affects the entire region simultaneously. When the big one finally happens, the sequence of destruction will unfold in terrifying waves. The first indicator will be the P waves, deep, low-frequency vibrations that ripple out from the epicentral zone off the coast. Early warning systems may give metropolitan areas like Portland and Seattle anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes of advance warning. Then, the destructive S waves and surface waves will arrive. For 5 straight minutes, the Earth will roll. High-rise towers designed only for short, sharp quakes will undergo sustained structural fatigue. Unreinforced masonry buildings, of which there are thousands throughout Seattle, Portland, and smaller historical towns, will crumble into the streets. In areas built on soft river sediments or filled land, a phenomenon known as liquefaction will occur. Solid ground will instantly lose its load-bearing strength and turn into a fluid slurry, causing bridges, roads, and building foundations to sink and tilt. While the land is still shaking, the second phase of the disaster will begin along the coastline. As the overriding North American plate rebounds and snaps back westward, it will lift billions of tons of ocean water upward, generating a massive tsunami. Within 15 to 30 minutes of the initial shaking, a wall of water up to 80 to 100 feet high will slam into coastal communities from Northern California to British Columbia. For towns located directly on the coast, evacuation times will be measured in minutes, and survival will depend entirely on how fast residents can reach high ground on foot. The geographical reality of the Pacific Northwest will amplify the human and economic crisis. Major infrastructure in Oregon and Washington is strung along a narrow corridor centered around Interstate 5. Fuel supplies, power lines, and water pipelines cross mountain passes and rivers via bridges that were never engineered to withstand a subduction zone quake. In Oregon, for instance, nearly 90% of the state's liquid fuel supply passes through a single critical hub situated on soft soil along the Willamette River. Liquefaction and shaking could rupture storage tanks and pipelines, spilling millions of gallons of fuel, igniting massive fires, and completely cutting off fuel distribution for emergency vehicles and rescue operations across the state. Coastal communities will become isolated islands as coastal highway bridges collapse and landslides block every road through the Cascade Range. Federal Emergency Management Agency models paint a grim picture of the aftermath. A full-margin Cascadia event could result in thousands of fatalities, tens of thousands of injuries, and leave over 1 million people homeless. Water systems, electricity networks, and internet infrastructure could take anywhere from several months to a full year to restore in the most severely impacted zones. The economic cost would easily climb into the hundreds of billions of dollars, making it the most expensive and devastating natural disaster in North American history. Recognizing this existential threat, state and local governments across the Pacific Northwest are racing against a clock with an unknown deadline. Cities are mandating retrofits for vulnerable brick buildings, reinforcing critical bridges like the Burnside Bridge in Portland to ensure emergency corridors remain open, and deploying sophisticated early warning sensor networks. Coastal towns are constructing vertical tsunami evacuation structures, specially built, reinforced towers designed to give residents high ground when natural hills are out of reach. Yet despite these massive engineering efforts, retrofitting an entire region's worth of century-old infrastructure takes time. immense financial capital, and public political will. Millions of people who moved to the Pacific Northwest in recent decades remain unaware of the silent monster sleeping just off their coast. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is not a hypothetical scenario dreamed up by movie studios or science fiction writers. It is an active, proven geological feature governed by the relentless laws of physics. The plates are moving today. The strain is building right now beneath the ocean floor. The Pacific Northwest isn't just hoping to avoid a massive earthquake. It is simply waiting for its turn on the geological clock.